Not every scene you write belongs in the final draft of your story. Today I'm going to teach you how to determine which scenes should stay and which ones should go. What's up guys, my name's Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer, I'm the author of Bad Parts, and welcome to my writing channel. If I asked you the question, what makes a great scene, you might have a lot of different answers for me, and a lot of them would be right. You might say things like flashy dialogue, or exciting action, or high stakes conflict, or tender character moments, and all of these would be valid answers. But if I asked you the question, what makes a scene necessary, you might have to stop and think about that. And instead of letting you think for too long, I'm just going to tell you up front, what makes a scene necessary is change. And not just any change, not just something like, oh, it's a sunny day and now it's a rainy day at the end of the scene. That's not what we're looking for here. We need change that is meaningful and affects a character. And that's the difference. If you have, for instance, a scene where a bird shits on the sidewalk, that's not meaningful. That doesn't do anything. But if you have a scene where a bird shits on a guy who is all dressed up for a job interview, that is meaningful. That causes that character to have to take action, to have to, make a choice. Do I cancel the interview? Do I wash myself up in the bathroom? Do I do something totally different? I mean, that is something that is a scene that would cause a character's situation to change, and that's what we're looking for. Now then the question becomes, what exactly should change? And Robert McKee, who wrote one of the best screenwriting guides out there, it's called Story, and I'll link it in the description below if you're interested, but McKee has this idea called story values, and he says that in every scene, one of these story values must change from either positive to negative or negative to positive. Now he defines story values as these universal qualities of human experience that may shift over the course of a scene. And these things he breaks down into a lot of different examples, and they're always binary opposites. So in other words, things like life and death, or health and injury, love and hate, ignorance and knowledge. And I'll throw a list of them up here right now just so you can see some examples. But basically he's saying that in every scene there should be a story value at stake, and that story value should change from one to the other. In order for a scene to be necessary and worthwhile, there must be a change in some story value over the course of a scene. That's how you know you should keep that scene in your book. For instance, if you're writing like a mystery story about a detective who was trying to track down a killer, and the killer had been pretty elusive up to this point, and the detective was completely ignorant of that killer's whereabouts, that scene would start with the detective being ignorant. But let's say the detective goes to the killer's old apartment building and finds a clue that puts him back on the trail. That would be an example of a scene where you go from ignorance to knowledge, that knowledge of where the killer may be. Now, on the other hand, if you had that same scene but the detective didn't find a clue, like he just goes to the apartment building and finds nothing, that would just be negative to negative, ignorance to ignorance, and that doesn't help us. So that's the type of scene you would have to just cut from the story. Now, how about some popular examples? Let's take a look at the horror movie Scream, and this is, of course, a 90s slasher film, and it opens up with a teenage girl. She's making popcorn for herself. She's got a positive story value, which is she's alive. And in this scene, she gets some shady phone calls from a killer. Eventually, the killer comes after her, and she ends up very, very dead at the end of the scene. And of course, this story value, it goes from positive, which is alive, to negative, which is dead. Now another example, in the first Star Wars movie, toward the end of the movie, right before the climactic Death Star battle, we have a scene between Han and Luke where they're talking before Han is about to leave with his reward. And of course, at the beginning of this scene, Han is very cynical. This is his negative state, his negative story value. He's very cynical. He doesn't believe in the Rebel Alliance. He doesn't believe they stand a chance going up against the Empire, so he just wants out. He wants to take his reward and get out of there. But Luke talks to him over the course of the scene, gives him a little pep talk, says, hey, we could use a fighter like you. You could make a difference in this battle. And at the end of the scene, Han has a change of heart. He goes from being cynical to being a believer. And this is, of course, punctuated by him saying to Luke, may the Force be with you. And as a result of this scene later on, Han proves himself to be a true believer when he interrupts Darth Vader's attack on Luke during the Death Star battle. Now, in the next Star Wars movie, Empire Strikes Back, there's the climactic scene between Luke and Darth Vader. They have their lightsaber battle, and once the battle's over, there's the scene where Luke begins in a state of ignorance about his lineage. Over the course of that scene, he learns that he is the son of Darth Vader, and now he ends that scene on the story value of knowledge. And this is just one example of how you can have a scene go from ignorance to knowledge. I mentioned earlier, if you have a detective who finds information or finds a clue, the same thing applies there. And this is typically one of the more popular ones is this idea of ignorance to knowledge, because it moves the story around without being too reliant upon things like action or heavy conflict or things like that. So keep this one in mind. This is one you definitely want to go to more often than the others. Ignorance to knowledge is something that can really weave your plot in a way that's interesting. Now, of course, there are tons of different potential story values you can work with. I just gave you some examples here. Just anytime you're looking at the scenes in your story, be sure to ask yourself, okay, what's at stake in this scene, and does it change? If it doesn't change, cut that scene from your story. There's no reason to keep it there. Find another way to include any necessary backstory or whatever else is going on in that scene, but for the most part, if nothing changes, you can just throw it out the window. Question of the day: what is your all-time favorite movie scene, and what story value changes over the course of it? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. Pick up a copy of Bad Parts if you haven't already. And as always, remember to keep on writing.